Welcome everyone to episode 42 of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts and today I talked with Alex Lahey, who is an artist, songwriter and producer from Melbourne. She currently is working out of LA as well as other various places around the world. In this episode, we talked about the importance of keeping things fun, the different types of songwriting processes she uses, and how the pathways of getting discovered have changed over the past 10 or so years. If you can do us a favor and share this podcast around, whether that's in a conversation, a DM, or in your stories on your social media, anything like that, just spread the word of this podcast. We want to get it out to as many people as possible. And just by sharing it around, you can help us do that. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms so you can stay up to date with every new episode that we release. And if you have any suggestions or questions or anything that you want answered, you can send us an email at podcast.whatsthatsound@gmail.com. All of the links to everything that we talk about, as well as links to everything about Alex, are in the show notes, so you can click on them and find all of the information that you need there. Hope you enjoy this episode. It is an absolute cracker. Episode 42 of What's That Sound with Alex Lahey. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of What's That Sound. I'm Stu Watts, and today my guest is Alex Lahey. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Stu. It's great to be here.
It's awesome to be here. I'm glad we finally were able to align our schedules, and I know that this is going to be an awesome chat. So tell us about, if anyone doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in the music industry.
Sure. Well, hi, my name is Alex Lahey. I am an artist and a songwriter and a producer. I'm from Melbourne, but I'm, on the road a lot, and I'm actually in Los Angeles at the moment. So we're coming from across the Pacific today, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, take us back to kind of where music first came into play for you. Were you in love with music from an early age? What was flying around your house at the time and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I was in love with music really early on. And it's kind of funny because no one in my family plays music. I'm like the only person still. Like my brother didn't sort of like pick it up as an instrumentalist. But I think the thing that like really came through in the house that we grew up in is that both of our parents were playing a lot of music. They were listening to good music. And I think that like having like good taste and like being able to like identify like, good music, even though it's so subjective, but like sort of like at least being presented with a bunch of different things is something that like I feel enormously like privileged to have been exposed to as I was growing up.
Yeah. So what was flying around?
Well, my father's from London, and he, so there was a lot of like the Clash and the Jam and that kind of thing like floating around, which is great. And my mum had us like a very eclectic kind of taste, going anywhere from like Bruce Springsteen to like Nana Mouskouri or like, Gregorian chant or whatever. So there was always all sorts of like different stuff floating around. Like, when I think about the seminal like music, like you think about what your parents put on at a dinner party, right? And I always think of that like Buena Vista Social Club record. And like there's like one particular like Gloria Estefan record where she like plays exclusively like Cuban music. It's friggin' rad. If you haven't heard it, it's so dope. And it's so it was kind of like going from, there from on some days to like, like Bob Seger and stuff like that. So kind of got like, exposed to a bunch of things and
huge range.
I just, and I just knew that I wanted to be making it from a very early age.
Very cool. And then so, then growing up a bit, talk to us about, were your teenage years, were you in bands? What were you doing around then?
Yeah, I mean, when I was really, really little, and I still don't know why or how I even knew about the instrument, but like I knew that I wanted to play the saxophone when I was a child, like a small
sweet.
child. And that was sort of like my journey, was to get there. And ever since I was like really small, I was sort of, learning how to play music, and was really lucky that like my family was able to, pay for lessons and like buy me a recorder, as in like not a tape recorder, but like a blow into recorder.
Yeah.
We'll get to the tape recorder later. But I sort of like started learning music, in a sort of like really like general macro kind of way. And eventually when I was 12 years old, I started playing the saxophone, and that coincided with when I entered high school. And I was really lucky to go to a high school with an awesome music program. And, like formal music training, like you kind of, I know for a fact it's a bit different now, but like back then, which wasn't even that long ago, like you only could really like learn classical music or jazz. And as a saxophone player, I naturally fell into like the jazz stream and tradition. And so the first bands that I was playing in were like big bands and like little jazz groups, which I loved. That was like the shit. Like when I was a teenager, cool. I absolutely loved it. And it was so cool. And I think like fueled a passion for playing with other people and like collaborating towards like a common goal and like trying to make something cohesive with 18 people or like however many people are in a big band. And I think that like informs a lot of how I approach music now and how I like to bring people into it as well.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I remember as well, like growing up, I think like I rebelled against that. Like you either went towards it if you're a muso, like the big band thing, like in my teenage years, and I was just like too punk rock, and I was like, no, fuck that. Like I'm going to play punk music with my mates, and then like so you either went one way or went the other way. But it was still a collaborative thing. I think when you're a teenager, especially, you're just like looking for something to be a part of. And it doesn't really necessarily matter, obviously, what the style of music is, but being able to play with people is so important. Like just to not isolate yourself when you're young. It's finding those avenues of, okay, how can I like learn how to play with people? Because that's so important, obviously, when you're going out and, playing in the future and stuff. Not that you necessarily know it in your teenage years, but it's a big part of being a teenager and playing music, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it was what was available to me at the time. I was like teaching myself how to play guitar, and I never formally I guess like the irony of my career is that the things that I do every day are not things that I was ever trained to do. And that's why I feel like, music, like I said, like learning music from a macro kind of way, it sort of transcends whatever like instrument or medium you're like doing it on, and you can just like apply it to different things. It's kind of like learning languages, like there are patterns that are the same, there are principles that are the same. And if you kind of like can harness an understanding of it, you can do anything if you just sort of like, take the time to figure it out and practice and that kind of stuff. But yeah, like after high school, I did like end up going on and playing in like other bands, and I think the punk in me like came out in that era. I went and started studying music at university, and that was when my like fuck this sort of like mentality came into it. I was just like, wow, I'm like really not connecting with this anymore. Which on one hand goes to show like how important great teachers are, like in any discipline. Like if you have, an awesome music teacher, it's like worth, that's what keeps people in the game, it's what keeps people wanting to create and passionate about it.
It's so true.
Yeah, and I got to uni and I just lost that, that ability to connect with the people that were sort of like trying to show me the path.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like you hear it sometimes, especially when you're producing lots of different bands, and you hear from people that are exclusively self-taught, and there's nothing wrong with that. If like you're passionate enough, you can absolutely learn by yourself. But I had a really great drum teacher when I was growing up, and I think of that so fondly. It was like such a big part of me learning about music, and he was teaching me all different stuff. I was into punk rock, but it was like Latin, it was jazz, it was everything, but he was a rock drum teacher and we connected. And it's like having that sort of kindred spirit when you're learning about music to me is so crucial, whether you find it in a teacher or someone else. But were there any other mentors in your early years, like growing up?
Yeah, I've been like, I still like have some of these mentors, like, one of my friend's dads is a guy named James Black who has sort of been like a very I guess like a legendary sort of session player in like the Australian and Melbourne music scene over the decades. And he's sort of most like recognized, I think, these days for being like, he was a member of the Rock Whiz band when that was on telly.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
He's a guy with like the thick glasses and plays the keys and the guitar.
Yeah.
And he like
What a legend.
has always like looked out for me over the years. And, he's someone that as of recently like call and I'm like, hey, can I just like come over for like a cuppa and a chat? And we sort of like, I don't know, just like unpack things and just talk on a really like honest and, big picture kind of level of, I guess like why we do what we do and what we do and just like trade stories. And it's really unreal. And, I think like, and another like, mentors that I've sort of had over the years, Tegan and Sarah, like artists that I've toured with really early on in my career. And, they're like really natural mentors. They don't mean to me. I think they just sort of find themselves mentoring all sorts of people and, and we're all better off for it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like, mentors are so important and, I hope one day when I have a bit, hopefully a bit more wisdom and experience and maybe success that I can sort of pay that forward too.
Well, I'm sure you already are with, you're working with a lot of younger bands and stuff like that. But I was going to ask this question later on, but I guess while we're on the topic is when you're, learning about the music industry and playing your early gigs and stuff, you have all these expectations of how things are going to go. You have this very like, it's very linear. It's like, oh, it's going to go this way. I'm going to get this gig. I'm going to get that festival slot. I'm going to get that producer and that's how it's going to work. But what was the differences, you've been going at it for 10 or more years now. What's the difference between what you expected at the start and what the reality of the music industry is for you?
I think the linear trajectory is like, I think whatever trajectory it is in that time, like it is, it ends, like it like the trajectory, quote unquote, that like I was leading, or I was trying to follow like in the beginning of my career, quite frankly, doesn't exist anymore. It's different now. And I'm not saying it's necessarily better or worse, but, things in the world happens and it shakes things up and it makes pathways different for every, era of artist that comes through. And that's why it's so important, like in my opinion, and I'm not saying this from like a strategic point of view, like I'm just saying it from like a human kind of way and in a way that's like kind to yourself and kind to others. It's really important to have like friends and touchstones from all sorts of like walks of life and like, eras of potentially the industry that you're in or just eras of the world. It gives you like a sense of perspective and a way of like, I guess like kind of taking it a bit easier on yourself and like knowing that there's a whole bunch of different ways to do things and you don't, have to be doing it the same as the next guy. In fact, it's actually better if you don't. So yeah, I think that that's like the thing that I've learned. But, at the time that I was coming up, like the trajectory that I was on, like especially in Australia, it was, basically get on Triple J. Yeah. I keep saying back then, but this was like 2016 or something. It's not that long ago. Like you would get full rotation on Triple J a couple of times and you'd kind of have a career. You could think about quitting your day job. But now that's not the case. It's different. And what is that thing that kind of helps you get over the line and doing this full time? Like, I'm sure it's many things, but the trajectory is certainly not the same as it was, in 2016.
And so obviously it takes a huge work ethic. Like you can't do what producers and artists do without having like a really, really intense work ethic. What was it about when you were, I guess still, like what are the things that you kind of look towards to be like, okay, I need to keep my focus here, here, and here? Do you have specifics, or is it kind of like going with the flow?
I think it's a bit of both. Like I spent a lot of the pandemic, and it's great to be talking to you about this. Like, spent a lot of the pandemic trying to do essentially like as much like professional development as I could in the like realms of like basically like studio work. So I think it's important to like make sure you do carve out that time for yourself and being like, I want to get better at X, Y, and Z, and like actually like going forth and doing it. And as an artist, sometimes those things are like, I want to get better at being on TikTok, like it's stuff like that as well. Like it's quite varied. So I think you need to have a bit of discipline like that. But, the thing about this business is that there's like, it's so out of your control,
True, yeah.
So my ethos is like, I just have to make sure I'm always like having fun, because the only thing that's guaranteed is that if I'm having fun and I feel like I'm being fulfilled, that's the only thing that I can count on. And until that, and unless that's like that has to be there. Otherwise there's no point like keeping on, the finances are unpredictable, the calendar's unpredictable, sometimes even the type of music you're making is unpredictable. But as long as you're having a good time doing it, that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, it's so true. And what you find when you're not having fun is that everything's just harder. Like you're just pushing up against a brick wall. You're like, why when you get stuck thinking about finances, for example, it's like the most obvious thing, finances, because we need to be able to exist. So it's like, fuck, where's my next paycheck coming? When's my next client? This, that. And you can get really stuck in that. And that's when the, sad feelings start to kick in. You're like, fuck, how am I going to get this back on track? And it's so true. It's like connecting with people, finding the fun in it, like trying to reconnect with why you do it in the first place. And things just kind of seem to fall into place or appear almost. Totally.
And that's the thing. It's like, like you said, it just sort of seems to fall into place, or it seems to appear, it just like quote unquote happens or something like that. But really it's like, it's those hours and hours and hours that you put in beforehand that like, may not feel like they're actually contributing to, those X, Y, Z goals that we were sort of talking about. But like, they do have incidental kind of consequences that can get you where you want to go. And sometimes like where that place isn't even something that you've thought of. That's like, to me, like one of my partner who's also an artist, like we refer to them as gifts. It's like, if you can think of like a gift every year that like the hard work has given you, like that can be a really like great way to sort of, take a bit of pride in like what you're doing and in those hours, the things that come to you that they weren't on your bucket list or goals list or whatever, but it's still something to like celebrate, and that you're like, wow, this is like really cool and like, and a marker of my hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Talk to me about, your, songwriting process. How has that developed over the years? Has it changed in the way you do things, or does it look similar to, the early days?
Yeah, I think my process has like, I've had many processes, and, sometimes like the journey through them is somewhat cyclical. Sometimes it's like you go in one end and you come out the other, and then you move on to something different. Like very, very early days when I first started writing songs and was sort of like becoming familiar with my identity as a songwriter, it was, sitting at the foot of my bed with my guitar and writing songs that sounded a lot like the stuff that I was listening to, like, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was sort of like me trying to figure it out when I started, and then, I was playing in bands following that. And so it was writing songs like in the context of a band. So you're in a rehearsal room, like trying to write a song with all these other people playing bullshit around it and, trying to everyone's just playing on top of each other and you're trying to figure, and you're trying to like hear what's in your head, which is challenging, but I also think a bit of a rite of passage for any songwriter.
Yeah.
And then when I started doing my own project, that's when I sort of started using like initially GarageBand and then Logic as like a songwriting tool, which then developed into, a more in-depth interest and passion for production and engineering. I do feel like that process got to a point where I sort of had to extract myself from writing on the computer all the time, basically. Even though there's been some great results, but I have found that like as I've become more, whether you call it interested or obsessive or proficient or not as proficient as I would like to
combination of all of that.
Yeah, on the software, it sometimes can like hold you back and take you out of like the sort of pure songwriting process. So, recently I've been doing a lot of songwriting for myself, like just on the guitar, like going back to the basics and trying to force myself into doing that. It's like, it's challenging, but it's really fulfilling. And it makes you really focus on the minutiae of the song, even though it's just like a guitar and vocal, which is really beautiful. But, when I write with other artists, that varies too. Like there's so many different ways that I've done it. And I don't know if I have a favorite, but as like whatever's the best for the song,
Well, I think for the challenge for rock music and some pop music, simpler pop music, not like over the top hyper pop music or whatever, but is that when you're writing on a DAW, you can kind of get a bit formulaic with it. You'll kind of, this is my experience with it, is that you can kind of go, okay, that's the verse, that's the chorus, this is exactly those parts, and that's the song. Whereas I think, especially when you're collaborating with other people, but even when you're just kind of jamming, you can kind of just go with the flow a bit and see what happens, and it can lead to more interesting results. And I guess I want to, when you are writing these days, when you're, say, writing for a project, are you saying this is going to be a song that's on my album, I'm writing for this album? And I want to quote a couple of songs in specific. I know Isabella's not on the most recent album, but Isabella and Newsreader, they're both quite different songs comparatively to the rest of your tracks. Do you try to emulate something, or is it something that is just a free-form process? Sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded question.
No. I mean, to touch on what you were saying initially, it's like, writing on a DAW, like one of the things that I find to be a real roadblock for me is that I start to write, basically like when I'm writing on a DAW, I'm getting too many visual cues that are like informing the way the song goes. Like not only, you were saying before, it's like, there's the verse, there's the chorus. Not only is it that you hear it, but you're seeing it, and sometimes I do find that it locks me into a repetitive template of writing and song form. And you want to shake it up a bit. Like I know that like there are certain forms that are tried and tested, and like they can be the hole in one sometimes, or sort of be the answer to some of the problems that you're finding. But sometimes you want to you don't want the ending spoiled for you in a way. As for those other songs that you mentioned, I mean, the process for both of those songs was so enormously different. Isabella, if I recall correctly, I wrote when I went to Nashville for a week.
Cool.
Not because there were people I wanted to work with there. I just wanted to go to Nashville.
Yeah, cool.
And I had this writing room for a week while I was there, and I'd already had these dates that I was going to record the second record. And I was like, I need to write as many songs as I can. So I just locked myself in this room and was writing and writing and writing and writing. Cool. And I think maybe 3 or 4 songs from, that period of time made it on that record, Isabella being one of them. And I think the inspiration for that song was I feel like there's always a song on one of my records that's a little like it's almost like a little bit of a joke or something.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
And Isabella was kind of like that sort of like fun, tongue in cheek, doesn't take itself too seriously song. And I think I was listening to like a lot of like, I don't know, like that sort of British like
Elvis Costello-ish sort of.
Yeah, like that sort of like very like, you know, all major chord sounding songs, you know, with a bit of a shuffle. And I was like, I'm going to like take this effectively what is a trope and kind of apply it to, to this sort of story that I wanted to tell. And, you know, and I wrote that on DAW and did it all that way. But I think maybe because with that song, like the vision I had for the music came first. So I was like, I want to hear that, you know, before I start actually writing the song. Newsreader, by contrast, was, well, first of all, it was a collaboration, but it was also written during the pandemic. So it was written on Zoom.
Right.
And I think that probably had an effect on the way that song sounds.
I love that song, by the way. It's such a great
thank
song.
you.
The lyrics and stuff, like it just there's something about the feeling of that song that's really nice. Like really, it just gives you that warm, nice feeling. Because
thank you.
You know, the lyrics are cheeky and, you know, it's very intimate. I don't know, there's something about it, but yeah, go on.
Thank you. I mean, like with that song, like myself and two of my friends, Jenny Owen Youngs and another writer named Christian Lee Hudson, both like very, I don't want to say traditional songwriters, but like they are like they're song people, you know. And I had this, you know, narrative. I was like, I want to write about the newsreader on the ABC because I'm see her all the time, and you know, and and we wrote the song together, and we wrote it in like 40 minutes or some shit. Like, you know, it was so quick, and then I went and recorded like a demo of it, and then that demo just kept getting like I just kept fleshing it out and fleshing it out and fleshing it out and adding stuff to it till it eventually became the master. And yeah, like both enormously like different processes, but I think the common thing that they have is that like I was kind of very sure about what I wanted the songs to be about, like before the pen had hit the page. And I find that the songs that I enjoy more personally are usually the ones that like have that focus before they even like exist in song form. Like the song, like the story is the genesis and then the song comes after that. So yeah.
Well, when it comes to, you know, the type of music that you play, I don't want you to take offense to this, but the music is simple, but it's also difficult to write that. So for me, that's a compliment. But
thank you. No, I say that's a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Well, when it comes to writing, you know, simple pop, rock, you know, those sorts of music that you know, seemingly it's all already there. You know, those styles of music, you know, it exists already. How do you push the boundaries? How do you try and make something new?
That's a great question. Like, it's something that I think about a lot, and I don't have the answer, but I can, like, I'll speak to my, like, I guess, like, perpetual reasoning behind these things. I think that the thing that I struggle with is trying to just let it be simple at the moment. Like, I am finding that that's a thing, a bit of a roadblock for me right now. Like, you know, and I think it's a pretty universal, like, experience for songwriters. It's just like, sometimes you just got to let it be what it is, you know. But then the thing is that like I hear, and I think the thing that makes like great records great is basically like recordings that make the song sound more kind of, I don't want to say complicated because it's not that the music's complicated, but make it sound different without the song being some like leaps and bounds, or like without the song being unfamiliar. You know what I mean? Like I think that some of the great records are things that are familiar that sound different. You know, I think of like some of my recent like favorite records. Like I thought the most recent Haim record was like really good at doing that. It was like a brilliantly recorded, a really creatively recorded and a really creatively produced record of songs that are very familiar. You know, if you play those songs on the guitar, it's like, it's not
It's 3 chords.
It's nothing
or 4
crazy.
chords.
It's not rocket science, you know.
Yep.
I think like the guys in Boy Genius have done a really good job of doing that, and I think that's like a big reason for the success of that record. Great songwriting, but really creative approaches towards the recordings, and so it feels like it's this like, basically like this groundbreaking, fresh, like, whatever, which it is in many ways, but the reason why it touches people isn't necessarily that. It's just because like the music's great and the songs are great. So like that's something that, especially when I'm, trying to write on a DAW, like we were saying, it's a delicate balance of letting the song be and not, and to be honest, like kind of not letting your ego get in the way of the song and overcomplicating it because you think that maybe you can be more complex than that, and maybe you can, but like, does that compromise a song? That's something that I find can be like a real challenge to overcome in the moment.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge for me as well, and I what helps me kind of come back to, no, simple is fine, is just listening to records that you love and that are huge, and you go, there's fuck all to this. It's like one guitar in the verse and that's it. And there's no special effects. There's nothing flying around. The song's just a great song. Like it just starts 100%. With it being a great song. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to do that a lot. Like when I was kind of coming to the end of my writing for my most recent record, I did the same thing. I like went and listened to and learned how to play, as which I think is like also a key to this process as well. A bunch of Joan Jett songs. I was just like, nice. This is like, it's just so simple, but it goes so hard, and it's just like, and it makes you want to just like stand up, like out of your seat, when you hear it. And I'm like, I think the thing that I was mistaking, I think that you can make a mistake between thinking that things that like really like touch you are, super complicated or like sophisticated. And again, to be honest, it's an ego thing. We are simple people, and that is a beautiful thing. Yeah. And that's why like the songs that are the great songs like kind of turn out to be pretty simple,
Yeah.
But the challenge is like how do you find the thing that, I mean, like, I know that we're on a very sort of technical kind of like podcast and conversation, but like, honestly, the thing that like separates like the great songs from, songs that are similar, there is just a certain magic to them. There is an inexplicableness, and I think that that's why we do what we do, because we're all looking for that thing. If we all knew what it was and had access to it, like, this would be boring.
So true, yeah.
And that's why we're all bloody punishing ourselves out here trying to find it.
I know. And
we're all a bit crazy.
But everything like, that's why I love collaboration so much, is because you just can't know what you're going to find. And people find this with solo music and, doing it by themselves, but you just never know what you're going to unpack when someone like throws something at you from left field that you just would never have thought of yourself. So I guess having said that, talk to me about your collaboration process and what does that usually look like? Is it always a similar thing, or are there like tons of different ways that you collaborate?
I mean, to speak, I guess like generally, like from because, I've been a collaborator in terms of like, I've invited collaborators into my own project, and I've also been someone who has been invited into other projects. And I've been a part of collaborations where it's like, we don't know what this is, but like we like each other and let's like make something, So, I mean, I think ultimately like the thing that makes a collaboration successful when there is an artist involved, whether it's myself or someone else, is that the artist has to take the lead in terms of the vision. And that doesn't necessarily mean take the lead when it comes to like the music or the lyrics or whatever. But I think like the artist really needs to know like what they want to say in the song. And I say to artists that I work with, I'm like, you need to believe in this thing that we're making. Like you need to like really connect with it, because worst case scenario in a way is that this song gets fucking massive and you fucking hate it. You know? And then you're living with it for the rest of your life. Like and you're known for it. You become synonymous with this thing. And like that's not fun.
Nah, no way. You hear it you hear it very often actually.
Yeah, you hear it all the time, you know? And so I think that like, you know, artist vision is really important, and quite frankly, some artists are better than others, and that's why not every artist is a success. You know, I think there are some artists out there who are just like, and it's not even about being like they know what the fans want. Like it's just about they know who they are. You know, they know who they are as an artist. Who they are as an artist may not be who they are as a person, but like it's about the project and like. And I hope that doesn't sound like totally void of emotion, because it's not. It's actually like highly emotional, you know, to be aware of that. And there are some artists that I get to work with who are really fantastic at that and like are really sure of their identity, and then that can sort of lead the way creatively, which is great. And as a collaborator coming into that, that's a real treat, you know, to be invited into someone's world that is so sure is really great. And then I can kind of come in and play dress ups and have fun and like, help make the music, you know, accordingly, which is great.
That's sick.
When it comes to collaborating for my own project, like, you know, I need to be really sure about what that vision is. Some days I'm more sure than others, and usually those days get the better songs. You know, that's how I know about, you know, the vision of the artist, because I've had it at times and I haven't had it at times, and I've seen what happens, you know, on both sides of that, and one is better than the other. You know, and you know, and we all have good days and bad days, and that's part of it. But you know, I think the people that I like to bring into my process are like. A song people, you know, people who really value the song and want to nurture it. There's a lot of people out there who, you know, especially like in somewhere like Los Angeles where I am right now, who are kind of trying to throw the maximum amount of darts on the board in the odds of getting a bullseye, which I respect. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that. But that's not really the type of person that I'm looking to bring into my world. And like I said, it's no shade at that other process. It's just not really what I kind of connect with in the room at the time. So, you know, like the people I was mentioning before, Jenny Owen Youngs and Chris Lee Hudson and Jackknife Lee and, you know, John Congleton, like, although we haven't worked together on, no, actually that's a lie. We haven't worked on music together, but not for myself. Like, you know, those are the people that I am like, yeah, we're cut from the same cloth, and we get it, and I think we make cool stuff together. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. Well, talk to me about, you know, when you do have, I guess there's lots of things that can be challenging in the music industry, but do you see similar things over the amount of time that you've been doing it, or is there always a new challenge popping up?
I think there's always a new challenge popping up. I think that's just the nature of the industry. I do think that ultimately, and, you know, I keep going on about the song, but I think the song always prevails. Like, you know, you look at the biggest songs at any given time, and there is always, you know, a stick season. Like there's always like, and I'm not saying it has to be like a folk song or something. Like there's always a driver's license. There's always like, even in those like in the deep pop echelon, like you know, there will always be the songs that rise to the top at any given time that are songs in their purest form. And that gives me, you know, that I go to sleep at night feeling really good about that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely,
like, I have a lot of faith in that. But I think that the way in which these songs are heard, like, differs greatly. I do struggle with the fact that, like, a lot of the, you know, I think that we've pivoted, the music industry has pivoted in a way today where like the big players in success are in fact tech companies. But I also think that's just like the world. You know, the biggest companies in music aren't music companies. They are, you know, like they're tech companies. And so in a way, like, I think I'm past my resentment of that. And I think I've like sort of come to accept it and been like, you know, actually like there are like some, you know, pros to it in terms of like trying to get exposure. But I think that the battle that we face as creators is trying to get, you know, the remuneration for our hard work and the success of the content that and the IP that we have, which I still think we're a fair way from, and I'm not entirely convinced that we'll get there. Unfortunately. But
it seems to me that with you know, when it comes to artists, and we're not necessarily built that way. You know, I'm speaking on behalf of the artist community in general. We're not necessarily built that way to be able to understand the business side of things. And generally you see that the people that do have a lot of business savvy tend to have a little bit more success in long term, not necessarily short term, but long term. And obviously having a good team around you helps with that. But, you know, potentially that's where those challenges come in. And I also think that things go in waves, you know, when a lot of people attach themselves to, say, a TikTok or something like that, eventually that TikTok's going to go away and people are going to push against it. And I think currently that's kind of where we're at right now. People are either fully embracing it and just going with it, or just saying, nah, I don't need to be a part of that world. And they find that independent success aside from what's going on at the time.
Yeah, totally. I think there's always exceptions to the rule. You know, and like I was saying, like about like, you know, even in the throes of pop music at any given time, there is always the song that comes through. I think that like that is a testament to the fact that you don't need to change your music to appropriate to the platform. Like you don't. Like a good song will be heard as long as you're up for putting it out there. I think is kind of like, I used to sort of think, I think like when I was younger, I used to think that it was like a good song will always be heard no matter what. But it's not true. It won't be heard if people can't hear it, you know, and you need to like maximize the likelihood of people hearing it. And I think that that's part of the, you know, the existence of an artist now. Like, I have done like sort of mentoring for younger artists before in like a kind of, you know, like a sort of more like organized setting. And, you know, we were talking about trajectories before. People would ask, you know, how do you get on the radio? How do you do this? How do you do that? And I used to have some answers for like, you know, I mean, you can put your music here and that's the way that it can happen, you know, sort of thing. But now I don't really have the answers because it's or like, you know, a guideline.
A set answer,
Exactly, that I sort of had before that of course like didn't guarantee success, but it was putting it in the, you know, ears of people who make those decisions at least. And now, to be honest, I think if you're an artist, like you have to be on those platforms. Like, you know, you have to be a content creator in some way. And, you know, does that fill me with joy? Not really, but like but I want, you know, my work to be heard. You know, that's why I make it. I make it for people to hear it. So like that's you know, I kind of have to come back to that, and it's it's an interesting existence right now, I think, for everyone. But yeah, it's when it goes well, it seems to go well. I wouldn't know, but like from what I see, it looks pretty sweet.
I mean, you're doing just fine. You're killing it. I guess the other thing, man, I lost my train of thought there. But okay, well, let's just like take a complete sidestep when it comes to you know, it was about understanding your audience, but we've talked about enough about that.
Sure.
When it comes to you creating your music, are there things that you like love to have around, like pieces of hardware or software that you're like, I really need this when I'm songwriting or producing or being, you know, in that creative phase?
Yeah, I mean, I have to have a guitar. That's sort of my like communication tool, and a microphone, like an SM7, like what I'm holding now, does the job. I have other microphones, but whatever you've got around works. I am a UAD bitch, so I'd always travel with my Apollo Twin. I think they're a fantastic piece of hardware, and fantastic software as well that comes with it too. And like I said, I work out of Logic as well, which I think is I also can use Pro Tools, but I do feel like Logic is there is an immediate creativeness about the interface that I really enjoy. And it's sort of like what's most familiar to me as well. I like the way it looks. I feel comfortable using it. So, those are sort of the things that I, if I have like a micro studio, that's what I got. Guitar, mic, interface, laptop, headphones. We're sweet.
Yeah, great. And is there new things that come along that excite you that like you're like, oh, this is great. I need to get this, or anything like that you get nerdy about?
I mean, I love my plugins like as much as the next guy. I actually haven't like done a big like stock up on them recently, which my bank account is grateful for. But I do feel that once you have your go-tos like and your toolkit, like, you're pretty set. For anyone who's, starting to get into the world of DAWs and like in the box recording, like, I think anyone is right in making the decision of Sound Toys being their first sort of like third party, plugins. I just think that they're like the boss pedals of plugins, they do exactly what they say they're going to do.
Never thought about it like that. That's funny as.
They always work, and there is a certain timelessness to them as well. I also love, all the Valhalla stuff. I think that their stuff is really, really, really great. I have been getting a bit more into the like, is it neural amp sims?
Neural DSP, yep.
Yeah. I feel, because my music is so guitar heavy, I feel like I have like run the gamut of like soft amps, and have eventually come back full circle to actually like the Logic stock amps. I think are kind of the best of them. And, I've been through them all, man. And like, I've just never been that impressed, but I think the Logic ones are really great. But
that's pretty awesome.
The neural ones for like, for either a really clean, like almost DIE tone, are really good, or a really like heavy tone. I was working with an artist this past week named Maggie Lindemann, and she's unreal, and we've been working together for a really long time. And I feel like as we've been working together, her music has kind of gotten heavier, like more into like an alternative kind of like heavy sort of world.
Cool.
And I think it's like Archetype Nolly.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
That they have is like perfect for that sort of like, that sort of like heavy but sort of but quite rounded edges, sort of like guitar tones that sits quite well, even though it's very like loud and thick. So yeah, I'm sort of been like fiddling with those a little bit too.
I love it. And do you kind of, when you're, say, producing with an artist, when it comes to plugins and stuff, like, is that part of the songwriting phase? Because those sorts of things can trigger, cool, fun things in the songwriting process, or do you kind of sideline that and focus on the song first and then play around with sounds?
I mean, it depends on the act. Like when I was working with, for example, like Teen Jesus and the Gene Teasers, it's like they're a band, and like they have their sounds. They have the pedal boards that they use live, and like they have like that sort of sonic identity. So when it comes to guitar tones like that, like I don't really want to fuck with like the identity that much. I just want to make that identity sound as good as it can sound, Sure. And so I feel like that's sort of my task. Also, like with a band that tours like that, like, and especially at the stage that they were in at the time, it's like those songs were being played live already. So they kind of had a life of their own already. Yep. It wasn't like they were stockpiling songs to like bring into the studio and then figure out how it sounded. Like the songs did exist, but when I work with, say, like Gordy, for example, who is like a very like sonically leaning artist, there is a lot of exploration that goes into that. And because she's so good at doing that exploring, sometimes my role is just like creating a setting, like, you know, and I don't mean like a setting in the box, but just like an environment where she can kind of like have an ease of like, you know, sort of like running through the meadows and like and trying out different things, and I'm kind of, you know, capturing it as it happens, and then we sort of figure out where it all sits after that. So I think that it's like it really does change from artist to artist, but in the songwriting process, like, does a different guitar tone mean that the song starts like going down a certain path or something? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think that it's sometimes a really good place to start.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's sick. It's, as soon as I start talking about tones and songwriting, it's like, that's the most fun shit. Like, exploring sounds is just like, oh, man. It just makes me want to.
That's where like the sort of like mind games of it all comes into it. You know, it's like for all of your intentions of coming out of the day with something, it's like someone can flick on a pedal and suddenly it's like, you know, it's totally different and you're going down a completely different path. Why? I don't know. But again, that's like the magic of it, huh?
Mm-hmm. And so we'll start to kind of round off the conversation. I guess when you look back on all of the things that you've done and kind of where you're at now, do you have things that you feel like you focused maybe too much on? Anything that you feel like you would have done differently if you had your time again, or anything like that?
Oh man, I mean, like creatively speaking, you mean, or anything?
Whatever, yeah.
I think, I mean, creatively speaking, I think I'm doing a lot of like unlearning and undoing of like tying my songwriting so much to the production process. But I also think that that'll be like a cyclical thing that I go through like for the course of my like creative career. Like, I think it's just like, it's just a phase. Like, and I think that as artists and creators, we're always going through phases, you know. That's why you never throw out that old PV amp. Like, it's going to come back. You know? But I think like, you know, from a emotional like standpoint, like I think that maybe I thought I was immune to burnout and I'm not. And being like really conscious of like the signs of that happening and knowing when to like, you know, sort of like pump the brakes a little bit. Especially when you're someone like me who has like a bunch of irons in the fire, like whether it's like I'm making a record for myself or I'm putting out a record or I'm touring it, coupled with like I'm doing sessions for other artists, I'm like making a record with another artist, or, you know, whatever that is. Like I think it can sometimes get away from me that like it's all work and it's all a lot of exertion, and like it can add up, even though it, you know, you can compartmentalize it as much as you want, but at the end of the day you kind of got to like listen to your heart and your brain and like know when enough's enough. So that's certainly like something that I'm learning to do, and I'm sure I will succeed and fail at various points in managing
do you have
that,
any
as we all do. But yeah,
absolutely. Do you have any specific things that you do to try and keep everything at bay? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I think I'm learning, but I at the start of the year I went on a trip for the first time in a really long time that wasn't at all like linked with work, and I went and I went to like I went to Egypt, and which is quite a like challenging place to travel, and so I'll just wait for that car to go past. Oh, damn. Yeah, I went to Egypt, which is quite a challenging place to travel, and as a result is somewhere that forces you to be super in the moment. And I think I realized that I hadn't been that in the moment in a really, really, really long time. And I think, you know, obviously I can't afford to go, you know, on a, you know, cool holiday every time I'm feeling shit, but like but, you know, I did find that was like, I was quite surprised by how much that impacted like, I guess like my focus and like getting back in touch with myself as well. And I came back from it feeling enormously reinvigorated, even though I wasn't like sitting on a beach for a week or anything like that. Like I was, you know, hitting the ground running every day. But like, yeah, it was really
it's like a reset, I guess.
It was a total reset. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I felt that was quite good. The problem is, Stu, is that I really like my job, and I'm sure you have that same problem as well. So like, I don't feel like my work is work. Like I get to, do stuff that I really enjoy every day, and I know that like, you feel the same as well. And so you get caught out. Like that's the problem.
I know, and it all just tends to catch up all at once. You're like, oh, okay, we're here again. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I like to do is at the end of the conversation, I like to ask if you had, one or a couple of bits of advice for people that are in their first 5 years or so, starting off, they're kind of learning about things, but they're also kind of finding their feet. What kind of bits of advice would you give, first of all, for producers or engineers that might be listening, and then secondly, for artists?
I think like always, I think that you. Okay, let me think about this and come at it like I've got all these answers like up my sleeve. I think that like being as genuine as possible, like in both, settings is really important, and it makes people want to be around you. Music is a social phenomenon, both in like a live music setting and in a recording and writing music setting. It's a very like people-oriented job. That's who we're trying to connect with. And I think that like, being genuine means that you connect with people and you get to develop relationships with people, whether you end up meeting them or not, and you don't do it for any reason other than to be kind. Like this is not like you don't go out and be genuine and be nice to people because it's a good business move, like you do it because it's just the right and the nice thing to do. Incidentally, you may find that you will benefit from a business setting because people will just want to work with you and opportunities will come your way because you're a nice person, but that's not the reason why you do it. I also think that like a really important message, and this probably goes, you could probably speak to this more from a producer way, but especially for artists, your career isn't over when you're 30. Like you don't have to have achieved all the things that you want to achieve by 30 or else it's not going to happen. I feel like there is a really common misconception that like we have to get everything like done by that point. Otherwise, like, we're not going to have the careers that we want. That just doesn't, like that is just not the truth. Life is long. We work for a lot of it, and what's the fun in it all being achieved all at once anyway? Like, like just keep plugging away and good things will happen and you don't even know what they are. So I guess like overall, like the message is that like there is so much that's unknown, and I think if you find the joy in that, like that's what keeps you like in the game, and ultimately like the biggest like the biggest success of this business is just staying in it. It's a real privilege to get to do what we do. We're so lucky we get to do what we do, and it's really easy to lose sight of that. And just have fun.
Yeah, well, that's it. And it comes back to exactly that, what you said at the start of the conversation is like when you're focusing on the fun, everything falls into place. Yeah, it's so true. I love it.
Just be kind and nice and do it all for the right reasons, Yeah. And that's also to say if you don't feel like something's a good fit for you, you can say no too. You don't have to say yes to everything, and sometimes it's better if you do say no, because if it's a genuine answer, then it's the right answer,
Yep, absolutely. Well, what's coming up for Alex Lahey in the near future?
I'm actually going to Nashville again for a writing trip next week, which I'm really pumped about. But, for me this year, it's just about like writing as much stuff as I can for all projects and, really getting into the weeds with that kind of stuff. I've got a few shows here and there, which I'm really excited for, coming back to Australia for a couple at the start of March, one in Wollongong and festival in Dinilakun, which would be cool.
Sweet.
But yeah, there's always stuff going on. And I'm actually like, to what I was saying before, like really enjoying being in the unknown right now. And I just feel really creative and I'm feeling good. Yeah, it's great.
Fantastic.
It's going to be a good year.
Love to hear it. Well, thank you for joining me today. It's been awesome. I've loved unpacking all of the stuff that we've talked about today.
Thanks, Judith. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks to you for listening, for checking this podcast out. do us a favor and share it with as many people as you can. We want to spread the word about how awesome the people in the Australian music industry are, and we love doing what we do. So if we can share this with more people, then that's even better. And make sure you're following or subscribed on your podcast platform that you're checking this out on, so you can stay up to date with everything that is new on What's That Sound. But thanks again, Alex, and thanks to you for listening, and we'll see you next time on What's That Sound podcast. Thanks for listening to What's That Sound. Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.